Representative Jasmine Crockett has been making the rounds in the media, fighting back against some of the worst of Trump's nominees for important positions. And she, like I think a lot of people, has identified sort of a common thread for the sort of men that Donald Trump picks. Take a look.
He doesn't want background checks, and he's not decided to put people in that are qualified. I mean, and not to mention, this has to be a historic number of people that have been accused of sexual assault or some type of sexual misconduct in some way. But what is really frustrating that the American people need to pay attention to is the fact that if you are going to work in one of these agencies, you will have to be most likely vetted to a higher level than the person that's running that agency. That's a problem. He's absolutely deciding that he wants loyalists. This is something that Project 2025 talked about.
And she's 100% right there. So people who, like a Hegseth perhaps, might try to get hired into the Department of Defense will likely have to go through a background check, but he's not. Matt Gaetz wasn't before he pulled out. And it's probably not an oversight that Donald Trump doesn't want the FBI looking into these people. I mean, look at what we already know about them, let alone what could be lurking out there in the shadows. And so he's picking all of these men with obvious flaws and crimes in their background and not wanting them to be checked out. And it's sort of an issue. But it's not just people like Jasmine Crockett trying to point this out. There was a woman who went onto Fox News and tried to make the case about Pete Hegseth there. Take a look.
We know that there were 3 cases of adultery for Pete Hegseth, and it is relevant. And the reason why it's relevant is Article 134 of the UCMJ considers adultery against the military, which the Department of Defense is part of. You can't lead an entire organization and all these people if you can't lead by example. 1, 2. I am a rape victim, and I can tell you there's a reason 1 in 10 rapes go unreported. And it's very difficult for a woman to go in and have a rape kit done. It's physically, mentally, and emotionally very difficult to go through that process, as I have. And I can tell you that, just very personal in my deep core, somebody doesn't do that with their husband and their kids in the hotel, texting their husband. Somebody doesn't go into the hospital and subject herself to that. And I have to say, I as a woman and as a victim, I believe the victims. And this is a problem for me.
So look, it's got to be tough to talk about your experience, to relive it like that. In particular, to do it on Fox News, knowing that the response that you'll get, certainly from the viewers on social media and maybe from other people on the show you're on, is likely to be absolutely grotesque. But I'm glad that she did, and I agree about her read of the dueling stories about what happened with Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth's account of it doesn't make sense to me. That's not enough to get you thrown in jail necessarily, but I have to be honest and say that I don't buy what he's trying to sell there. And I think that she's right about leading by example. This is a guy who is not only insanely flawed in his own life and what he's done, deeply immoral things he's accused of having done, but what he's advocated for so goes against the very idea of the oath of service that all of these people take, Francesca. It's wild to me that he hasn't yet been pulled as a nominee.
I mean, it's not wild to me, and I do think that a lot of the nominations and a lot of what's to come is very much we foresaw this, we knew this, he said this, believe him when he says what he's gonna do. It is the only test that you need to pass to be in the Trump administration is how much of a loyalist are you? He's not willing to take any risks with a Jeff Sessions who's gonna recuse himself. He's not gonna take any risks with anybody who could blow the whistle on all of the corruption, the criming that he's gonna be doing behind the scenes, and how his administration now is just sort of a siphon for as much dark money as possible, primarily right now in the transition, right? But I think more deeply, the first Trump administration kicked off the Me Too movement. I mean, it truly was a catalyst for saying, here is a man with dozens of allegations of sexual assault, misconduct, and now he's become president. And from there, I think a lot of women and survivors were like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm done with this. I'm done with keeping quiet. And they spoke up about the people in their lives, in their professions, who had aggressed upon them. And I think that it is even more stinging now that it's not just Trump, but so many of the administration appointees, the people that are going to be working alongside him, also have these allegations. And so I don't think we're going to see the same kind of movement, but I do think we're going to be seeing some kind of feminist, if you will, but really justice-oriented movement that takes me to even deeper, and honestly and hopefully involves Republican women. And I say that very, very candidly as someone who truly wants, I'm not gonna lead that movement, but I truly want Republicans themselves to get serious. Stop looking at trans women and trans people. Start looking at the men in your own party, and what are you going to do to protect yourselves and actually have some dignity? I mean, right? You spend all your time looking at the other side, and you don't look at yourself in the mirror. And so I hope, I'm not holding my breath, but I really I can't imagine continuing to toe the line as a woman in the Republican Party and not seeing how that line ultimately is about you being a second-class citizen, being brutalized and shutting up about it.
I love the idea that would happen, and I hope that you're right. And it's impossible to say. I mean, none of these social movements are predictable. I think fundamentally, it's lightning in a bottle. But I will say, like, Donald Trump is the perfect. Donald Trump is the typo-ridden email fishing for scam targets. It has every red flag imaginable on purpose. Because if you get to the end of it and you haven't read any of those red flags, then you're ripe to be conned. And that's what he is. Like, these Republican women that still find him and the party acceptable, they've done everything they can to get through to these women that they freaking hate them and they don't think they're deserving of rights or consideration. And yet they still side with them. And so I share your hope, but it's an abstract hope untethered to any specifics or evidence, for me at least.
I mean, it's just like, it's really depressing though, because you're like, we could spend all this time looking at the manosphere, looking at like, oh, what about men? Like, what is it? Why aren't we listening to men? And then you have a woman, I've been on panels with like women who are like Republican women who are like, you know what, the problem here isn't like reproductive rights being taken away and women bleeding out in hospital, waiting rooms. The problem is men. And like, there is a sickness. That is a deep sickness. So it's like, forget a Joe Rogan of the left. Like, when are these women going to get a little radicalized and see their situation?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe someday they take over the Republican Party.
I mean,
maybe that's the only thing acceptable, because all this is about power. So maybe they should just directly take the power rather than just stand in proximity to it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna call for that. I'm gonna call for Marjorie Greene to pull a coup on the MAGA movement. Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.